About 9 months ago, I set out to document our family history. I wanted to capture the memories before they faded and dig into the official records to separate the myths from the facts. What I found was a story of survival, of grit, of flying doghouses and stolen dimes, and of a man who crossed an ocean to leave his name behind. I'm so excited to announce that I've turned our family story into an audiobook, and I want to share it with all of you. Over the coming months, we are going to travel from the soot-stained cobblestones of Dublin to the trenches of the First World War. We'll ride along for the great autoclave heist. We'll survive the Battle of the Thames Valley, and we'll remember the incredible men and women who built the branches of this family tree: Kathleen, Eileen, Jake, Tom, and Bob. In the Hespeler of the 1930s, a boy's world was measured in the distance he could travel on a single-speed bicycle. It was a town of humming textile mills, of streets lined with sturdy brick homes, and the constant, reassuring presence of the Speed River carving its path through the landscape. For a boy with an imagination, however, the true map of the world wasn't defined by the town limits, but by the dusty country roads that spoked out in every direction, promising freedom and adventure, and on that map, no destination shimmered with more mythic allure during the sweltering summer months than Puslinch Lake. It was more than just a body of water. It was an expedition. The journey itself was a rite of passage, a test of endurance that separated the serious adventurers from the backyard dreamers. On one such scorching summer day, the call of the lake became irresistible for two of the Carroll brothers, Tom and Jake. The plan was hatched with the conspiratorial whispers that only brothers can share. It was a grand undertaking, one that required not just stamina, but capital lunch, after all, was not going to buy itself. Tom, born on October 19, 1924, already possessed the clever can-do spirit that would define his life. Tasked with safeguarding their shared wealth, a single precious dime, he devised what he felt was a foolproof security system. He carefully pried open the metal bell on his handlebars and deposited the coin inside. It was a stroke of genius, he thought. The money would be safe from pickpockets, hidden from view, and secure from the bouncing journey ahead. With their plan in place and their treasure stowed, they set off, their bicycle tires kicking up clouds of dust as they left the familiar streets of Hespeler behind. The ride was an odyssey in miniature. They pedaled for what felt like an eternity, the sun a relentless weight on their backs. The rhythmic clicking of their chains became a hypnotic mantra, punctuated by their own breathless chatter about the glories that awaited them. They spoke of the shocking, blissful cold of the water, as it would hit their overheated skin. They debated the merits of the hot dogs they would soon purchase, a feast earned through sweat and toil. Every push of the pedal was an investment in the paradise that lay at the end of the road. When they finally arrived, legs aching and faces streaked with grime, they were triumphant. They had made it. They parked their trusty steeds, and with the grand air of a man opening a safe, Tom went to retrieve their funds. The moment of discovery, however, was not one of triumph, but of slow-dawning horror. As he unscrewed the bell's casing, his confident grin faltered, then vanished completely. The bell was empty. A close inspection revealed the culprit, a small gap in the metal, imperceptible at the start of the journey but made fatal by the incessant rattling of the ride. Somewhere on the long, dusty miles behind them, their dime had been shaken loose and lost to the roadside weeds. They were hot, they were exhausted, they were ravenously hungry, and they were utterly, hopelessly broke. The glorious feast they had imagined evaporated into the shimmering heat. The afternoon was a lesson in the cruel laws of physics and the folly of even the most brilliant plans. But as the acute disappointment faded, something else took its place. The shared disaster didn't drive them apart. It bound them together. The long, hungry ride home was made not in silence, but with the kind of gallows humor that would become their trademark. The story of the lost dime became a foundational piece of their personal mythology, a perfect encapsulation of their shared black sheep spirit, eternally optimistic, prone to grand schemes, and unbreakably loyal when those schemes went sideways. It was a small-scale failure that forged a lifetime of alliance. This was the essence of Tom Carroll, even as a boy. He was a magnetic force. He possessed a quick grin and a booming laugh that would one day win over customers and command boardrooms. But in Hespeler, it simply won him friends. He and Jake were a matched set partners in the kind of minor, good-natured trouble that was the lifeblood of a small-town boyhood. They were a unit, a two-man team navigating the complex world of a large family, always knowing they had an ally in their corner. Tom was the talker, the planner, the one whose natural charisma could often smooth over the rough edges of their latest misadventure. He was a born extrovert, energized by people, a student of the human connection, long before he knew how to make a living from it. But the idyllic world of boyhood, with its seemingly endless summer days and epic bicycle journeys, was living on borrowed time. As Tom and his friends grew into their teenage years, the world outside of Hespeler was growing darker. Newsreels at the local cinema showed marching armies in faraway lands. Radio broadcasts brought grave-faced pronouncements from world leaders into their living rooms. The whispers of conflict in Europe grew into a roar, a sound that would eventually reach across the Atlantic and demand a response from a generation of young men who had, until now, been concerned only with swimming holes and lost lunch money. The call to duty was coming, and it would mark the true and final end of their boyhood. The boy who had lost a dime in his bicycle bell would soon trade that bicycle for army boots, the dusty roads of Waterloo region for the uncertain landscape of a world at war. For young Thomas James Carroll, that call to serve was an immediate, urgent summons that simply could not wait for official timelines or the trivial matter of a high school education. The story of Tom's entry into the war effort is not one of a formal enlistment office, but of a classroom at Kitchener Collegiate Institute. At the age of just 16, sitting at his desk, he was overcome by the conviction that his true place was in uniform. As his brother Bob would later recount, Tom made a decision that was as impulsive as it was dramatic. He literally jumped out the school window and made a beeline for the recruiting station. He was tall for his age, and with the force of his conviction and a lie about his birth date, he successfully enlisted in the Army. For a time the deception held. He was in uniform training and filled with the patriotic fervor of a boy about to become a man. The moment of his deployment grew imminent, but back home, his father, Pat Carroll, discovered the truth. Pat was a man who knew the brutal reality of war, a veteran who carried the physical and emotional scars of the trenches. The thought of his underage son being sent into that inferno was unbearable. Faced with an impossible choice between betraying his son's trust and allowing him to walk into almost certain danger, he did what any father would. He saved his son. Pat contacted the military authorities and revealed Tom's true age. The ruse was over. Tom was unceremoniously kicked out of the Army, furious at the bureaucracy and humiliated in front of his peers, never knowing who was responsible. Pat Carroll never told his son that he was the one who had made that call, carrying the secret for the rest of his life in a final, protective act of fatherly love. His dreams of immediate service dashed. Tom entered a brief period of civilian work, taking a job with the Coca-Cola Company. He still longed to serve, and like many young men, dreamed of following his brother Jake into the skies. His determination to serve never wavered. As soon as he turned 18, he re-enlisted, this time legitimately. The war had shifted, and so would his role in it. Denied a place in the cockpit, Tom was destined for a different form of service on the home front, where his extraordinary talent for the bagpipes now became his duty. He did not go overseas, but his impact was profound. He became a pipe major with the esteemed 48th Highlanders, a position of great respect and musical leadership. His skill was so recognized that to advertise for the war effort, he also served temporarily as a flight sergeant within the RCAF pipe band. His role was to stir the soul of the nation, to uphold tradition, and to honor the men who were fighting. He played at countless official ceremonies, his pipes bringing a sense of solemnity and pride to parades and memorials. In July 1944, he had the immense honor of playing in his hometown of Hespeler. The boy who jumped out a window, now a respected leader in uniform. Later that year, on November 11th, he played at a service in Centralia, the haunting notes of his pipes paying tribute to the fallen. While he never faced enemy fire, Tom Carroll served his country with distinction. He became a huge advocate for the men who fought, his music a bridge between the home front and the battlefield. His was a service of morale, of remembrance, and of art, proving there is more than one way to answer the call of duty. With the discipline of his military service behind him and the future of a prosperous post-war Canada ahead, Tom Carroll was ready to build a life. That future truly began when he met Margaret Flack, a woman whose quiet competence and deep well of compassion were the perfect complement to his own boisterous charisma. Margaret, known to all as Marg, was a graduate nurse, a skilled professional whose calling was to care for others. In an era when nursing was one of the most respected professions for a young woman, this was a testament to her intelligence and her steady, capable nature. Her training gave her a poise and a practicality that would be the anchor of their family for the next 50 years. With the stability of his marriage to Marg and the growing needs of his young family, Tom Carroll entered the professional world of post-war Canada. It was a landscape of burgeoning optimism, and for Tom, whose entire personality was built on connection, the world of sales was not just a job, it was a calling. He began his career in the veterinary pharmaceutical industry with Stevenson, Turner, and Boyce, a name that, like many from that era, has since faded into the corporate past. This was the perfect training ground. It was a world of long drives on two-lane highways, of dusty farm lanes, and the distinct earthy smell of a rural veterinary clinic. This was not the cold, data-driven sales environment of the modern era. Success was built on relationships, not spreadsheets. It was about remembering the name of a veterinarian's oldest child, about asking after his wife, and about being a welcome and trusted presence. Tom excelled. He could walk into a clinic, his large frame filling the doorway, and immediately put everyone at ease with a booming laugh or a well-timed joke. He was one of the black sheep Carrolls after all, and he was as comfortable sharing a beer with a client after hours at the local Legion as he was explaining the benefits of a new antibiotic. He wasn't just a supplier, he was a friend who happened to carry the best products in the back of his car. His ambition and success soon led him to a management position at Labatt's Veterinary Products Division and later to a significant role with a division of Pfizer, the global pharmaceutical giant. It was this move to Pfizer that brought the Carroll family to London, where they settled into their new life and home on Commissioners Road West. It was during these years of professional ascent that Tom cultivated the persona that would define him for a generation of colleagues. He became the Piper. His passion for the bagpipes, long a feature of family life, was brought onto the public stage. The Canadian veterinary community was a tight-knit group, and its conventions were the social and professional highlights of the year. Tom saw an opportunity to bring a touch of ceremony and a lot of his own personality to these events. The image became legendary. Imagine a formal hotel ballroom, perhaps at the Constellation Hotel in Toronto. The low hum of conversation fills the air. Then from the back of the room a sound pierces the atmosphere. The unmistakable soul-stirring skirl of the pipes. Every head turns there, in full Highland regalia. The kilt, the sporran, the polished gilly brogues, was Tom Carroll, his cheeks full of air, a look of immense pride on his face as he marched slowly and deliberately through the maze of tables to pipe in the association's president. The performance didn't end there after the official duties. Tom's hospitality suite became the place to be. Long after midnight, with friends like Dr. Murray Smith and many other industry stalwarts gathered around, he would play again. With his tie loosened and a drink in hand, to the chagrin of any other residents in the hotel who were trying to sleep, he would fill the small room with music, laughter, and camaraderie, creating a bond that no competitor could hope to break. He was building his own brand, one built on joy, tradition, and a force of personality that was simply unforgettable. But to truly understand Tom's relationship with the pipes, one had to see him away from the conventions, away from the spotlight he so enjoyed. The real heart of his passion was on display during the hot summer weekends, at the Highland Games in places like Cambridge and Fergus. These were family pilgrimages. As his daughter Kim recalled, they were an essential part of every summer. Colleen, too, cherished the memories of her dad driving out to Kitchener to pick her and her husband Merv up for the games. They'd find their place in the stands, and Tom would be completely in his element. The true magic arrived with the massed bands, as hundreds of pipers and drummers from across the province marched onto the green field. The chaotic symphony of individual practice fell silent. Then on the pipe major's signal, a single unified sound would erupt, a wave of music so powerful it was a physical force vibrating through the wooden bleachers and deep into your chest. It was in these moments that Colleen would watch her father. The public performer, the gregarious host, would vanish. He would sit utterly transfixed, his eyes locked on the sea of musicians. And as they played, his hands, resting in his lap, would begin to move. His fingers would dance silently on an invisible chanter, his spirit playing every note along with the massed bands. He was no longer a spectator. He was a participant in a ritual that connected him to a deep and ancient part of his heritage. This was not a performance for clients or colleagues. This was for him. It was a passion so pure and profound that, as Kim noted, it became a part of his children's emotional inheritance. The reason that even today the sound of the bagpipes can bring tears to their eyes. It was this man, the savvy salesman and the passionate piper, who was now poised to take the biggest risk of his career by the early 1960s. Tom Carroll was a proven leader in his field. An opportunity arose within Labatt's, the parent company he worked for, that was less a simple posting and more a high-stakes mission. As his daughter Kim recalled, the company had a fledgling veterinary pharmaceutical business in England that was struggling. Tom was given a 5-year post with a clear directive: go to the UK and turn that business around. For many men with a wife and 4 young daughters, the logistical and emotional challenge of uprooting their entire lives would have been a non-starter. For Tom, it was an irresistible proposition. It was a grand adventure, and the Carrolls were all in. The entire endeavor began with a scene of near chaos on the docks of New York City in 1963. Their vessel was the legendary Queen Mary, a floating palace that promised a civilized and luxurious passage to Southampton. The scene on the pier, however, was anything but civilized. A longshoremen's strike had paralyzed the port, leaving passengers to fend for themselves. There were no baggage handlers, no friendly stewards to guide the way, just a sea of confused travelers and a mountain of luggage. Here Tom's character shone. While others may have despaired, he took charge. With the determination of a military man and the unflappable confidence of a born problem solver, he managed the seemingly impossible task of getting his family of 6, along with a collection of massive travel trunks, and incredibly, the children's bicycles, up the gangway and onto the ship. It was a triumph of pure will, and it set the tone for the entire adventure once aboard. Another surprise awaiting. Accustomed to being careful with expenses, Tom was initially unaware of the full extent of the company's generosity. For the first day or two, he didn't realize that all the wonderful experiences the ship had to offer were being paid for, including, to his surprise, an invitation for him and Marg to dine at the captain's table. The good fortune continued when their daughter Joanne, trying her luck at the ship's bingo game, walked away with a prize of $100, a small fortune at the time, and a sign that luck was on their side. They arrived in England, not to the picturesque country lanes they might have imagined, but to the harsh reality of a historic, brutal ice storm. Their planned rental house was not yet ready, so the family was temporarily housed in a rustic farmhouse, a place ill-equipped for what was one of the coldest winters on record. The pipes froze, solid almost immediately, but Tom and Marg's resilience, a quality they possessed in abundance, turned a potential disaster into a cherished memory for their daughters. They presented it as a great lark, boiling snow on the stove for bathwater. For the children, this wasn't a hardship. It was camping indoors, and they felt completely safe, cocooned by their parents' calm and competence. Once settled, the family embraced their new life with gusto, piling into a tiny Austin Mini to explore the United Kingdom and the continent. Amidst all this adventure, however, Tom and Marg became aware of the personal cost of the move. Their eldest daughter, Lynn, then a teenager of 13 or 14, was deeply missing her life back in Kitchener, especially her solid friendships and the young people's group at her church. As Kim remembered, Lynn shared her heartache with her parents, and they took it to heart. This was the moment that truly defined Tom's character. He faced a choice between his 5-year career path and his family's happiness. He chose his family. He went to the powers that be at the company and made a bold, audacious promise. He told them he would complete the 5-year turnaround mission in less than 2 years. If he succeeded, he wanted the company to send him and his family home. It was an incredible gamble, but he delivered in June of 1965, just 2 years after they arrived. The family boarded the Franconia for the return voyage to Canada. As the ship navigated the churning, unpredictable waters of the Irish Sea, Tom remarked to his family on just how incredibly rough the crossing was. Looking out at those turbulent waves, one can't help but wonder what was going through his mind. Standing on the deck of a secure ocean liner, a successful man with his wife and daughters safely beside him, he was crossing the exact same treacherous waters his own father had faced as a terrified 11-year-old stowaway decades earlier. The unspoken contrast between those two journeys was staggering. They were not simply at the end of a posting, they were returning victorious. Tom had fulfilled his professional duty in record time, and more importantly, he had honored his promise to his daughter. They had been tested, had seen the world, and had proven that together they could handle anything. The English adventure was over, but the bold, decisive spirit it had revealed would soon lead Tom to the biggest professional challenge of his life. Despite leaving high school, Tom accomplished a great deal. He became a proven leader in the veterinary pharmaceutical industry. The boy that quit high school accomplished a lot. He was a proven leader in the veterinary pharmaceutical industry. Returning to Canada, Tom Carroll brought with him a new sense of perspective. The adventure in England had broadened his horizons and solidified his confidence. After the sale of STB to Pfizer, he was now a respected and successful manager, a secure position at the heart of a global corporation. He had a comfortable home on Commissioners Road in London, Ontario, a loving family, and a clear path forward defined by quarterly reports and strategic plans devised in distant boardrooms. For most men, this would have been the pinnacle of a life's work, but for Tom it was beginning to feel like a gilded cage. The corporate world, for all its security, was fundamentally at odds with his nature. His greatest asset, his booming, charismatic personality, couldn't be quantified on a performance review. The deep personal relationships he had spent 2 decades building felt like they were being gradually replaced by impersonal metrics and sales targets. He felt a growing unease, a sense that the work was becoming less about the people and more about the numbers. It was the restlessness of a man of action and instinct, and he began to feel the undeniable pull of a different path, one where the risks were entirely his own, but so were the rewards. It was the pull of a door with his own name on it. The idea of starting his own business was a monumental risk, one that surely dominated late-night conversations at the kitchen table with Marg. It meant walking away from a steady paycheck, a pension, and the prestige of a global brand to dive into a world of profound uncertainty. But he would not have to take that leap alone. He found the perfect partner in Kingsley Armitage, a colleague who not only shared his vision, but possessed a complementary set of skills that made the daunting venture feel possible. Together, in an act of shared courage, they made the decision to leave the security of their established careers and bet on themselves. They would build a veterinary pharmaceutical manufacturing and distribution company from the ground up, and they would call it Armitage Carroll. Their new venture was built on a single, powerful founding principle that was a direct reflection of Tom's own character. In an era where massive companies were increasingly selling their products directly to large-scale agricultural operations, Tom and Kingsley saw a deep-seated betrayal of the independent veterinarian. Tom had built his career on loyalty, and he expected it in return. His foundational business strategy was therefore a declaration of that loyalty. Armitage Carroll would sell exclusively to licensed, practicing veterinarians. It was a promise that they would be a partner, not a competitor. It was Tom's personal code of ethics, codified into a business plan. The early years were a testament to their grit. The work was all-consuming, a 7-day-a-week mission that blurred the lines between work and home. For a time, it became a true family affair. Marg, ever the supportive partner, came to work in the business alongside her husband. She was no longer just hearing about his day, she was living it. She felt the pulse of the company, sharing in the quiet thrill of a big order and the gnawing stress of a slow month. She saw firsthand the immense pressure he was under, the sheer relentless effort it took to build something from nothing. Her presence was more than just help. It was a deepening of their partnership, a shared dream being built box by box, invoice by invoice. Their strategy rooted in integrity paid off. Veterinarians who felt increasingly abandoned by the industry giants rewarded Armitage Carroll's loyalty with their own. The business flourished. They eventually established the company in its final location at 100 Towerline Place in London. And in a fitting testament to the enduring bond of the two Black Sheep brothers, this location became a true Carroll family hub. A couple of years after Tom and Kingsley were established, Tom's brother Jake and his son Tim partnered to build the factory for their own successful venture, Carroll Healthcare, on the empty lot right next door, Armitage Carroll and Carroll Healthcare. The boys who had once been unable to buy lunch after a long bicycle ride to Puslinch Lake were now anchors of London's business community, entrepreneurs in their own right, working side by side. It was a powerful, unspoken symbol of how far they had come, a life's journey measured not in miles, but in the tangible reality of two successful companies built from scratch. After years of relentless effort, the thriving, respected enterprise they had poured their lives into did not go unnoticed. Eventually, the time came to sell. The sale was a resounding success, a financial validation that provided lasting security for his family. Yet, for an entrepreneur who builds a company in his own image, the story rarely ends there. There was a bittersweet postscript. After the acquisition, the very thing that had made Armitage Carroll special, its fierce independence, its personal touch, was inevitably absorbed into the machinery of a larger corporation. The name itself disappeared from the landscape. It is the classic founder's paradox, the pride of creating something valuable enough to sell, and the private heartache of watching it vanish. The full dramatic story of the company's rise and its eventual fate is a business saga filled with lessons on loyalty, competition, and the nature of legacy, a compelling tale waiting for its own book. The sale of Armitage Carroll marked the end of Tom Carroll the entrepreneur, but it provided the freedom for him to fully become the patriarch he was always meant to be. The relentless 7-day-a-week demands of building a business were finally replaced by the gentle, self-imposed rhythms of a life well earned. The financial security was never the end goal in itself. It was the means to an end, and that end was the full-time pursuit of his two greatest passions, his family and fishing. The perfect stage for both was the place that had captured his heart a lifetime ago. In 1977, Tom and Marg purchased a property on Manitoulin Island, cementing a love affair with the place that had begun on their honeymoon 30 years earlier. This was more than just a cottage. It was the establishment of a family sanctuary, a northern kingdom where he could reign as the benevolent and beloved Laird of Manitoulin. When outfitting the cabin, Tom was adamant about one specific detail. He insisted on getting an old-fashioned wood stove. Looking back years later, his daughter Lynn wondered what drew him so strongly to that particular fixture. In many ways, it feels like a beautiful, subconscious nod to his heritage, a comforting echo of the peat smoke hearths that had warmed his father's childhood in the liberties of Dublin. The man who had once commanded a room at a sales convention now commanded a small fishing boat, and he did so with the same unwavering sense of purpose. Arrival at this kingdom was an adventure in itself. His niece, Marg, recalled visiting after her father Elmer died in 1978, a trip meant to bring comfort and connection. Tom met their car at the ferry not in a family sedan, but in a distinctive red pickup truck he'd proudly bought from the local Indigenous chief. With a grand gesture, he insisted her mother, Eileen, ride in the cab with him, while Marg and her husband Ed hopped into the open truck bed for the drive to the cottage. As they bounced along the island roads, locals would smile and wave warmly. It was a friendly welcome that, as they soon realized, was intended for the truck's former, more famous owner. It was a perfect introduction to life with Uncle Tom, a little bit of ceremony, a touch of humor, and a good story already in the making before they even reached the driveway. The central ritual of life on the island was, of course, fishing. His routine became the stuff of local legend. 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening, he would head out onto the water in his boat. His departures and returns were so punctual that neighbors would later joke they could set their watches by the sound of his motor. This was not a solitary pursuit. It was the core of his identity as a host and provider. But Tom's legendary passion did not always translate to patience with his crew. His niece Marg also remembered being tasked with driving the boat, her instructions seemingly clear: aim for a specific point across the lake, follow the fish finder, and keep it steady while he and Ed fished from the back. But her course was not to his exacting standards. He got so frustrated with me that I wasn't aiming at the right point, she recalled, a fond memory of a man who took his leisure as seriously as he had taken his business. He would eventually return to shore, his grin as wide as the sky, holding up a string of glistening trout for all to see, and waiting for him would be his Marg, ready to continue the simple, loving pact they had made in Cheguanda in 1947. He caught the fish, and she cleaned them, preparing for the feasts that would draw their family together all summer long. The property was a magnet, the gravitational center that pulled his daughters, their husbands, and a growing brood of grandchildren into his orbit for weeks at a time. It was on the shores of that island, with the smell of pine in the air and the sound of laughter echoing off the water, that he was most truly himself. But life with the Laird also came with a few house rules. He was fiercely protective of the cottage's fragile infrastructure, and as his daughters recalled with a laugh, no sleepover was complete without Uncle Tom's familiar, booming warning about the septic tank. "Girls, don't use too much toilet paper." This role as the happy patriarch was a thread that ran through all his later years. Christmas morning at the Carroll house was a scene of happy chaos, a whirlwind of torn paper, squeals of delight, and a mountain of boxes. At the center of it all, Tom would sit in his favorite chair, not opening gifts, but watching. A broad, satisfied grin would spread across his face as he surveyed the joyful pandemonium he had created. He was the architect of this moment, the quiet power source for the family's happiness. Marg, in her own gentle way, would be right there with him, so enthralled by the delight of her children and grandchildren that her own presence would sit untouched beside her. And when the last gift was finally opened, Tom would lean back, sigh with contentment, and deliver his signature line, the official closing of the ceremony: "Well, it's all over for another year." Even a simple outing like a trip to the CNE became a cherished ritual. In later years, after a triple bypass had slowed his formidable pace, the adventure was less about the rides and more about the food and a leisurely stroll through the horse pavilion. His daughters remember him tiring from the long walks and, with no ceremony at all, finding a grassy slope where he could lie on his back, his legs propped up, to have a quick cat nap before continuing the day. It was a moment of quiet vulnerability, a reminder that even the largest personalities are subject to the tides of time, yet his desire to be there, to be part of the family fun, never wavered. In the end, the legacy of Tom Carroll wasn't etched on a corporate letterhead or measured by the success of a business sale. It was written in the laughter of his niece, riding in the back of a pickup truck, in the exasperated fondness of a novice boat captain, and in the countless happy memories he carefully constructed for his family. The booming voice of the salesman, the proud bearing of the sergeant major, and the soul-stirring cry of the bagpipes were all facets of a single remarkable man, whose greatest accomplishment was the love he inspired. The piper of Commissioner's Road had played many tunes in his life, but his true masterpiece was the family he nurtured, a legacy that continues to echo, warm and resonant, through the generations. Welcome back to the Cousins Corner this week. The family memories really started pouring in, and it has been absolutely wonderful to read your emails. First, it was so great to hear from Cousin Doreen. She remembered visiting our family up in North Bay, and she mentioned how much she laughed at the detail of Dad tearing the pages out of his novels as he read them. She remembered him perfectly as the jovial uncle. But she also pointed out something beautiful about my mom, Trudy. Doreen noted how incredibly calm Mum always was, even right in the middle of the classic Carroll family gathering chaos. Doreen also shared a profound thought. She said, "It is amazing to see how the intense experiences our parents faced before we were even born ended up shaping the parents we knew growing up." She said, "We have a legacy to be proud of." That sentiment was perfectly echoed by Cousin Jen, who also wrote in this week. Jen mentioned that listening to these stories has given her and Bruce a tremendous newfound appreciation for our Carroll heritage. And speaking of those early experiences, my sister Pat was listening from her cottage, and she realized I left out two incredibly funny details from Dad's sales career in Chapter 6, which instantly jogged my own memory. She reminded me of Dad's time selling Macavity valves and fire hydrants, a job that left our house flooded with Macavity notepads for years. But even better, she reminded me of his automated car wash phase. Dad was selling systems for Erland Car Wash, and he was so dedicated to demonstrating how they worked that he ran his own gold '69 Ford Maverick through the wash until it completely rusted out. It's the ultimate salesman story, and I'm definitely putting it into the final printed book. I also want to give a special shout out to my extended family. My sister-in-law Denise and brother-in-law Brad wrote in to say they are listening too. In a beautiful piece of serendipity, they actually sat down and listened to Dad's chapter on August 18th, which just so happened to be my dad's actual birthday, as well as Denise's dad's birthday. It was a very special coincidence. Before we go, I want to remind everyone that the official APB for Grandpa Pat's World War I bullet is still active. If anyone has a clue which drawer or jewelry box that souvenir ended up in, please email me. Keep the memories coming, everyone. I'll see you in 2 weeks for Chapter 8, where we explore the story of Uncle Bob, the anchor.